Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, participants, to what is the second installment in a series of four webinars entitled The Impact of Business Unusual, organized by the NTU Nanyang Business School Alumni Association. My name is Jack. I will be your host and moderator for today. Just a brief intro, like you, I am a member of the alumni. I graduated in 2005 with a MBA from the NBS. And currently I'm quite actively involved, volunteering my time with the Alumni Association. My day job, I spend the bulk of my time across a variety of different businesses, but mainly focused in the areas of augmented reality, blockchain, and data analytics. We are very, very pleased today to announce that we have over 300 participants on this call from 18 different countries. So we're really looking forward to having a wonderful session with our panelists. The session will be recorded. And for those of you who have questions as we go through the presentation, please use the Q&A function to submit it. And we have a team that's helping with the moderation of the questions, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as possible during the live session. We also ask you to stay back if you can after this to participate in a short survey, just so that the school can use the feedback to improve for future seminars. Without further ado, I want to introduce our guest panelists for today. We're very delighted to have Professor Goh Kim Huat join us. He's from NBS. Some of you may be familiar with him. He's as you know, the MBA academic director, and spends a lot of time on the data analytics side of the business. Apart from his time in academia, he also consults extensively for both the public and private sector, and I'm sure a lot of you are looking to hear from him. Our main presentation today will be delivered by a good friend and colleague of mine, Maurizio. He's got a exciting deck to share, and he's gonna basically come on and tell us a little bit more about how Twitter is doing it, what they're doing, and give us a good sense of how digitalization is going to affect our lives going forward post-COVID. So with that, Maurizio, I'm going to hand the room to you.
Jack, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and of course also to the NTU NBS Alumni Association to be part of this initiative. Let me start right away. As Jack said, I'm going to talk a little bit of not only what Twitter does, but how things change so fast in these days. All these dots that you can see on this globe are actually tweets of real-time conversations, go from east going to the west. And I don't know how you guys would reply if I were to ask you what Twitter is. But, and I do hope that out of these 300 and odd people, we have a good amount of Twitter users, but Twitter is really what's happening in the world. Whether it is the current affairs that we are experiencing every day, events in the world of entertainment or fashion or in the world of sports. This is really what's going on in the world. I assume that you guys are old enough to remember what happened 2 years ago when France won their second World Cup. I know it's a big deal for me. Italy wasn't even there. But this is an example of how the conversation spiked around that moment. And during the same event, these are the conversation around another funny moment. So people are talking about what is happening and they attach themselves to what is going on. But Twitter is not only moments. Twitter is also movements. Twitter is a platform where if things start getting picked up organically, people will start talking about it. There might be a moment in which you go down, but then within the first 72 hours of the Me Too movement, within the first 72 hours from the first time that article was published on the New York Times, you can see the movement starting. And by the end of this 72 hours period, you know that that hashtag is going to be forever ingrained in our culture. This is something that happened organically, but this is something that happened a little bit with the help of great marketers. You might recognize this athlete. This is Colin Kaepernick. It was blacklisted by the NFL for his stance towards civil rights. He kneeled during the national anthem. He caused uproar, a lot of people complaining. He literally lost everything. But in the anniversary of the Just Do It campaign, Nike came back and saying, we are going to ride this opportunity. And they started a campaign where instead of focusing on the actual athletic abilities of people wearing Nike apparel, they tied their Just Do It message to the fact that if you believe in something, this is what needs to be done, and you have to just do it. And all of a sudden, Nike and all the hashtags that were associated to that took over Twitter. Over the course of 72 hours, 96 hours, this was the most important conversation, whether it was positive or negative, whether it was people burning Nike apparel, buying more Nike apparel. All of a sudden, Nike was trending. And immediately there was a massive uptick in sales. And the actual value, this was a campaign that was run exclusively on Twitter, no other social media platforms. The investment was $5 million, and the return, the actual visibility was more than $300 million. But can you imagine being a marketer, a CMO that allows your company, thanks to a campaign, to add $6 billion to your market cap? This guy is definitely going to get a massive bonus. So again, Twitter is what's happening, and now things are happening extremely fast. But let's talk a little bit about what Twitter is today. Twitter is fast. Twitter is the first thing that people go and see what's happening in the world. Whether it's TV, sports, entertainment. Now another big vertical that is coming up is gaming and esports. Twitter is really the pulse of what's happening in the world. You can personalize it, because you follow the term, you are exposed to certain topics that you do care about. It's a conversational tool. This is not about the reading and sharing. This is actually a conversational tool. Our CEO, Jack Dorsey, likes to associate Twitter to call Twitter the conversational engine of the internet, and it's kind of the best description that you can have of this of this tool. It's a way for you to find what's happening, find like-minded people or people that are on the different side of your spectrum of beliefs, and engage in a conversation. Most importantly, it's open. You don't need to have a Twitter account to experience the content. You don't need a Twitter account to be exposed to what is happening in the world. Fun fact, I was supposed to join Twitter in 2016, and 2016 was also the year when a lot of people were like, Twitter is going down. Twitter is going to disappear. I could not join because they weren't hiring. And then in 2017, they started hiring again. Probably they lowered the bar, and I managed to sneak through. And but Twitter is growing. The growth that we have experienced so far is massive. And one thing that we like to focus on when we talk to our publishers, because in my line of work, I need to convince them to start working or start using Twitter more or better. But of course, on the other side of my office, we have the people that have to sell advertising against that content or sell advertising to reach that audience. And the metric that we started looking at is how many people we can actually deliver an ad to. And we've been growing at a steady pace. Actually, Q1 compared to Q4 was a massive growth, driven, of course, by the need of information around COVID-19. Massive growth, as I said, 24%. And when people say that, they are all in the United States, it's not really true. A lot of our MDAUs are coming from international market. In Japan, we are way bigger than our competitors, for instance. And we are growing steadily also in other markets. Our growth from international market is actually outpacing the US growth. And I'm sure that you guys are familiar with YouTube, the video website for, the #1 video website. But actually, Twitter's growth was fueled by video consumption. I like to say that considering what we are and what we do, Twitter is the YouTube of now, and YouTube is the Twitter of yesterday. And you can see that Indonesia, Thailand, and India are really driving adoption. 70% of our people, of our users in APAC are watching live streaming. It's extremely mobile and social media. And it's not just a matter of watching it now, because there are fewer things that can be watched. There's only so much of Netflix that you can watch. And of course, there's no live sport. So let's spend time online. But this long period of outbreak has actually changed even our behavior, with the 62% of people that are looking at continuing doing so even after restrictions are lifted. So 84% of our users are here to see what's happening right now. And 80%, they want to find new perspective. That's the whole point. They want to be exposed not to a network of like-minded individuals or just watching videos. They really want to find new and unique perspectives. So, and now that we are moving closer to the reason why you as marketers, you as people that are going to work in this industry, Twitter is really the place where is the best place where you can connect to what movements, national holidays, trends. In one word, you can connect to what's happening. If I were to ask you, I know that you guys cannot answer at the same time, but if you were to say how many people out of 100 would wake up not thinking about a brand? A lot of brands, I think that everybody is around them. It's not. It's not. 77% of the people are like, if these brands, a lot of people are like, if 77% of the brands were to disappear, we wouldn't care. It's not. These are marketers that are actually also working with us, and they saw the shift in what needs to be done. It was reach. As the more I pay, the more I can get in terms of results. It's not this anymore. It's not like that. Now you need to be part of what's happening. And in our case, you need to be part of this conversation. Because the cultural relevance is what really matters. There are, of course, you know, the reputation of the brand, the price and whatnot. That's totally fine. But it comes down to 23% of cultural relevance. If you're part of that conversation, actually, the more you're part of that conversation, the better the results will be. And in my line of work, Jack and I cooperated a couple of years back on a few things, and he heard me saying this a lot. Brands are looking for what's relevant to the audience, because, as I said earlier, that brand might disappear and there's no long-lasting legacy. In this case, instead, in order to break through the noise, to raise above the crowd, if you're not part of a conversation, people won't care. And again, I'm going to share this deck with you, so I'm not going to bore you to death by simply saying that, by simply repeating what you have here. But these are extremely important data points. That when certain things are happening, the platform is performing extremely well. I'm not saying that you as a marketer or you as a media buyer, or if you want to launch a product and so on and so forth, you don't have to use the other platforms. What I'm saying is that now more than ever, Twitter is a great place where you can get in touch with your audience, with people that might be interested in what you have to say, and people that might want to buy what you're selling. Okay, you can build relevance to your brand. You can reinforce your message, especially now, because it's now more than ever, right? There are certain countries that are coming out of a massive epidemic, something that we haven't experienced in our lifetime, unless one of these 300 people is 101 years old. So as much as we are trying to go back to normal, it's going to be different. We noticed that there's a shift in the perception of what people think about brands. Brands need to help. They have to be helpful. We are living through tough times, so they need to be something that I can really say it's helpful. And at the same time, though, people are not happy in seeing that brands that are exploiting the situation. There are plenty of examples. I didn't want to single out anyone, except. So the bottom line is that you are what you do, and you are going to be judged exactly by what you do. Right now is just the way it is. I'll bring up only one example that is both bad and good at the same time. So I don't know how many Liverpool fans are in the audience. Congratulations on your first title in 30 years. But Liverpool was on the wrong side of history when they decided to not pay, to furlough non-playing personnel. But at the same time, they were immediately the first one to come back and reverse that decision. People spoke, and not in pleasant terms, about Liverpool, and their voices were heard. There was the club walked back that policy, and they actually got support. And look, this is something that should really drive every single time that we are going to reach out to a large audience. You need to be open to admit that you're wrong. And more often than not, when you are actually this open, you're actually going to be okay. So, in conclusion, Jack, I promised that I was not going to go over my allotted time. But in conclusion, these are strange times that can be opportunities. We need to take them as a chance to change some of the things that we've done in the past, revisit what we think was the right way, and make sure that if you are not part of this conversation, you won't be part of the game. Thank you so much, guys. And of course, if you have questions, you can find me at Maurizio. DMs are open. And I'll be back to you, Jack.
Thank you, Maurizio Grassi. Thanks for sharing. Fantastic presentation. And I'm sure the questions are going to come in fast and furious. We're getting some people trying to use the chat function. Just as a matter of housekeeping, can I just request that you use the Q&A function so that we can channel your questions properly to the panelists. So to kick things off, we're going to give Maurizio a break because he's worked very hard in the last 20 minutes, and maybe throw our first question at Kim Huat. So Professor, the impact of COVID-19 obviously has been very, very different for a lot of us, depending on which part of the world you're in and which segment of the economy or community you're in. But I think the one thing that's common is that the effect is going to be profound and felt for many, many years after. So in your view, how should businesses shape their digital strategies? What should they be thinking about when it comes to handling the disruption caused by the pandemic? Love to hear your thoughts, Professor.
All right, so thanks, Jack, for the question. I would say this is a relatively broad question, so as to say, and I think it's a good question to sort of kick off the discussion that we have, right? But of course, if you were to look at this question, you probably want to break it down into two parts, right? So first is, of course, what kind of industries get disrupted, why they get disrupted, and of course, the second part is specifically would be how would they sort of use digital strategy to sort of handle those disruptions. Well, the first part of it, which is to look at how different industries, I would say the COVID-19 pandemic has sort of affected almost every industry, but some in a positive way and some in a negative way, right? And of course, if you were to just take one step back and try and think about what kind of industries get impacted and what not, one can always use a very simple heuristic, right? If you look at any industries, any companies, they essentially provide services or goods to others, right? And services and goods would have typically some aspects of it which are physical in nature and some aspects of it which is digital or informational in nature. So for example, if you are New York Times or any press company, it's likely to be informational in nature, right? And of course, if you are, say, in the hospitality industry or in hotels and whatnot, largely physical. So if you take that as a thing, as a sort of a starting point, I think what becomes very clear here is depending, if you were to look at industries that were badly affected, disrupted in a negative way, they are largely in the physical side of things, right? If you're in the industry which is in the digital side of things, you're also impacted, but there are ways to get around it, right? So if you look at all the online, the Zadas, the Shopees and whatnot, no? Digital space, they are impacted, but business is actually good for them. So for the rest of the businesses which are somewhere in between, right? Somewhere in between, because not all businesses are all digital or physical. Some businesses have somewhere in between. Then the question is to ask yourself, what aspect of your businesses are not digital or not digitized? Try to make it digital and in a way accelerate that process. So let me give you one example. So yesterday I saw a news article, right? One of the ventilator makers in Singapore, right? So ventilators, physical product, right? It's not a digital product, right? Physical product, right? Yep. And they were sort of being disrupted in a good way in this case, right? And they were trying to produce ventilators. But they discovered there's one aspect of the ventilators which involves the taking of measurements, right? Which are readings, these are information, right? Of the ventilators. That part of things, that aspect of it, it is challenged because you need to get staff, or you need to get medical workers to go there and sort of extract that information from the machine, and it sometimes can be hazardous for the medical workers to approach these machines, especially when there's a patient that's incubated. So what they did was that they digitized that part of the product, right? And it's currently online, right? So anyone can take the reading anywhere, right? There's no need to get into the isolation ward to get that information. So in a way, depending on whatever services or products that one is sort of providing, the question is how can you sort of distill out the physical part and the digital part? And for the digital part, that is where the strategy comes, right? And it's usually easier said than done, right? You really need to take one step back and look at the processes. Today, many companies are also re-engineering their processes, right? Because the jobs have changed, right? Parts that are digital, right? You can work from home. Parts that are physical, if it's important, it's called essential services. If it's not important,
yep.
then you have a hiatus, right? You get lockdowns and whatnot. So I think that's one way of which you can still look at it, right?
Okay, Nat, fantastic. Thanks for sharing. And I think speaking of working from home, Twitter has certainly led the pack, Maurizio. I think about a month and a half ago, it was announced globally that Twitter would allow its employees to work from home indefinitely. Not quite sure what that means, but it sounds great. You know, I think a lot of us are going to go apply for a job at Twitter after this, maybe.
Yeah, it actually, so it means that, Jack, short pants, 24/7, that's the thing. But the thing is that Twitter was already thinking about this. COVID-19 just accelerated this process. We had our global conference in Houston in mid-January. And even though I was already tweeting about this thing and I was making jokes, trying to jinx it, and instead I was proven correct. And my own colleagues were making fun of me of this thing. Actually, one of the first things that Jack said on stage, the very first day that we assembled all together, was like, this is how we are going to work in the next 18 months. Within the next 18 months, we are going to put things in place so that you guys do your job however you want to do it, from wherever you want to do it. Of course, there are rules and and guidelines, but at a certain point, when offices started closing, we just I think that it was extremely it was incredibly useful, the fact that, okay, why are we even thinking about what to do in 6 months? Let's put in place the plan that we wanted to have in place no matter what. And we were the first ones, but we are not the only ones. To Professor Kingwatt's point, if you are 100% a digital company, great, but what happens to the people that have to deal with to have personal interactions or interactions in person and so on and so forth. I feel like personally, my job might be, it's not the working from home that might be impacted, but that might impact my job, but is more the not being able to travel. I think that a lot of industries will have to deal with this thing when you are used to have a personal relationship and cultivate these relationships so that you can, you know, in my case, bring them onto the platform, making sure that content is monetized and so on and so forth. That is probably more relevant. But we have to change. That's just the way. And
that's a good point, Maurizio. So we got a nice question, and it's sort of going to lead into this because it's related to what you and Kim Huat just talked about from a member of the audience. And the question reads, to what extent do you think different cultures affects the popularity of Twitter as a platform for digital communication in this part of the world? And I think what you and Kim Huat have talked about really is about companies, corporations, individuals having a natively digital culture and others not. So how has that sort of impacted Twitter's popularity as a platform in Singapore or Southeast Asia?
Okay, I don't want to get fired, but unfortunately I can't hide from the truth, right? So the Twitter is an open platform. It's not a network. You download the app from the news section of the App Store or Google Play. So at the end of the day, in order to be really exposed to what's happening in the world, you also need partners that are telling you what's going on, right? Across all the spectrum of verticals and ideologies and whatnot. Other platforms instead are networks. So by definition, you are going to talk with these people in your own language. They are not relying on third-party content. You create your own content. And in case of videos, you know, you're watching something, maybe something educational, something that is interesting, something that is funny. You don't need to speak Thai to laugh at a cat falling down the stairs. So I think that one of the things that Twitter, I didn't say didn't do well, but lacked at the beginning was these local networks of content providers. Something that when you launch the app for the first time and they ask you, so what are the topics that you are interested in? News, entertainment, sports, and so on and so forth. And let's say if you are in Bangkok and you're picking football, you know, maybe we do not suggest you to follow the NFL because it's not the right kind of football, but we suggest you to follow the Thai league. And the fact though that there's this massive growth happening, especially in this part of the world, I think that we are on the right path. It's not a matter of you know, the absolute reach. There are two things that matter for us. Is one, what are people talking about right now? Because after this webinar, we are all going about our own lives. So we are going to disconnect from this that is happening now, and we are going to do something else. And the second thing, because we are not a charity, how do I monetize these activities? How do I monetize the people that are coming back every day for more?
Great. No, thanks for sharing. And yes, certainly I see the popularity of Twitter being amplified, especially in the last 6 months because of how global events have become. And you raise a good point, you know, as our travel plans are sort of truncated for the foreseeable future, then these digital platforms obviously serve to better amplify both communication and sentiment. So with that, I'll probably pick up another question that has come in from the audience and direct it back at Kim Huat. It's a good one related to just what we spoke about. What are the changes in consumer behavior, Kim Huat, that you see coming out of what is happening right now globally and in Singapore? how do companies or professionals sort of then adjust or adapt or temper their strategy to better sort of relate to consumers and at the same time get a leg up on competition?
Okay, so I guess if you look at consumers' perspective, how have they changed? I guess in the last 3 months, 4 months or so, the consumers are forced, right, to accept certain things that traditionally that they will not be. So because, if you look at adoptions of consumers and certain behavior, usually that take time. But I think what happens in a very short period of time, will cause consumers to adopt certain habits, certain behaviors, and this will sort of force upon them, right? And of course, with this choice of, like, for example, shopping online and so on, right? So with this forced adoption, we are essentially seeing some acceleration of moving towards a digital platform for services and products, right? And of course, the natural thing is that if you're trying to get into if you're looking at services or products that are being administered via digital platforms, then the simple analogy is that you're going to see greater competition to a great extent, right? When you start digitizing, say, for example, sales, retail, and whatnot, then the question is the search ability for the consumers to search for things reduces. And in a way, it creates this, what we typically call the Amazon effect, right? So you have very, very large companies that have the ability to attract lots of networks and network base. And in a way, that also will create a crowded outcome situation within the digital aspect of things. Let me give you one simple analogy, right? So if you look at, rewind back, say, 200 to 300 years ago, right? In the time where we do not have music being pushed out via Spotify and via digital platforms. If you want to listen to music, you would have to really physically be somewhere where someone is singing to you or playing an instrument, right? Mm-hmm. When you start having digitalization, what happens is that the ability to transfer such services, right, gets consolidated, and you have this situation where there's winner takes all, right? And I think that is one potential challenge that is coming up, right, for some of the industries, right, where you potentially would have the ability of consumers from moving from one company to another relatively seamlessly, because you're going to have a lot of companies moving into the digital space if that's viable for them.
Yep.
Right.
No, great answer. Thanks. And the questions are coming in fast and furious, so I'm going to try and join the dots a little bit. There's one that's quite relevant to what you just said. So we hear a lot in terms of adaptability, that going forward, soft skills are really going to be important in a very sort of a data-driven, data-heavy era. And I think, again, accelerated and amplified by what is going on now. So in your mind, Kim Huat, what are from the perspective of a business school, what are the skills and capabilities that will become essential in the new norm? Whether you are working in a big enterprise or whether you are an entrepreneur trying to start your own startup, what in your mind are some of those that stand out for you? And we'll get more into your view as well from a hiring perspective later.
All right. So I guess in terms of, I know it might sound cliche, I think agility becomes the first thing that comes into my mind, right? If you look at planning and whatnot, right, for businesses, and in the last 2-3 months, we've gone through so many changes, right, in terms of your planning, right? And because it's honestly almost impossible to plan for uncertainty whereby you do not have probabilities of the different possible states, right? So things are always emerging. So the ability to handle uncertainty, right? I think that becomes a very, very important part in terms of to a certain extent, it's a personality thing, right? But also to a certain extent, it could be trained, right? To understand that, where you could have uncertainty, but at the same time, it's something that one should sort of thrive on and to sort of accept those inherent risks that you have. Communication, I would say, is definitely still very important here, right? But I guess the point about communication sort of relates to Maurizio's earlier ideas about relationship building with existing folks, because you can fly there and physically visit them and say hi to them. I guess in the next 6 months or so, a lot of us will be relying on our existing relationships, right? One thing about working from home and whatnot is that, if you are not new to the company, you are incumbent in the company for many, many years, I guess it's less disruptive because you know the people to call, you know the things to say and things not to say, right? But the very fact is that if you are new to a company, it's going to be a problem because 70% of our communication is actually not what you say, it's how you say it, and all the cues that sometimes gets difficult to sort of translate via a video call, right? I think so. Those communication I would say is going to be significantly challenged, but it's still nevertheless a very, very important thing, right? In the next 3-6 months, we won't see that, but I think if this is going to prolong for, say, for the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to have a lot of dysfunctional kind of activities going on with people saying the wrong things and so on, right? So in a way,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the whole issue of building trust, establishing credibility suddenly becomes really, really key. And maybe that's a module on the HR side of things that the NBS can think about, because this is here, this is now, this is real, as you said. Maurizio, from a hiring perspective, surely this has changed your lenses a little bit as a big employer, being in the digital space. Some of the issues that Kim talked about, and I'm sure hiring has not stopped because you guys had a blowout quarter last quarter, and you're trending so strongly at the moment. What are some of the qualities that you look for? Has that changed, or is that sort of evolved?
I don't know if it has changed. One thing that I can say, and look, guys, I was a big fan of Twitter from the very beginning. So my background is in sports media. I used to, produce content, make documentaries, try to monetize content in all different shape and forms. And I've always thought that social media was the next frontier. I mean, if you are a media company and you don't have a social media presence, which unfortunately sometimes is what happens here in Southeast Asia, where you have some entrenched entities that really do not want to change their ways of doing business. When I joined, I noticed that they're actually good people. When I said that they lowered the standard by hiring me, I felt like that for a long time. These are good people that believe in what we are doing. And probably this is what we are looking for, the ability of really buying into what we are trying to do. What the thing that really, that should really strike is the fact that we are really working for a company that has an impact on everybody's lives, at any given time. I was online when George Floyd's video started circulating. I watched it when I had only 100,000 views. I don't sleep, I'm an old man. But this is the fact that I really saw history unfolding in front of my eyes in my timeline actually gave me a lot of pride. And there's this myth or idea that in tech we're all a little bit of jerks and so on and so forth. People on Twitter are great people. I think that's the kind of people that we want to work with because, again, when you have to go and talk to somebody in person, this is the image that you want to pass to them. You represent a company that is trying to do well, and you should be happy and proud. It's not a matter of paycheck. We really want to be. We have this hashtag called love where we work, and another hashtag one team. These are all internal. I wouldn't say for internal use, but this is something that we came up with because we really want to show appreciation for what we are doing. We might not be doing everything right at the right time, but at least we are trying all the time. And if people want to be part of a company that has really a positive impact on the world, yeah, this is probably, qualifications, certificates, diplomas, degrees, and so on and so forth. This is something that everybody has now. You know, the knowledge is something that you have, but what you do and how you use it, that's a different story.
Okay, now fantastic. Thank you for asking. And the questions are still coming in fast and furious, but unfortunately, we are getting to the close of our session. So the school wanted me to just inform the audience that for questions that the panelists are not able to answer live on this session, we will get back to you individually with answers to questions you've asked in appreciation of your time. But I'm just gonna pick maybe one last one for discussion, and there are a couple of questions that are all kind of homing around the same sort of a topic, Maurizio. We have a number of people asking for a comparison of Twitter to other social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm sure you answer that question 20 times a day. And how advertising-driven media companies can pivot and diversify revenue streams during challenging times like that. So there are all a couple of questions rolled into one. I'm just trying to aggregate it. Maybe your thoughts as a bit of a parting shot before we go back to Kim Huat for his thoughts as well.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for this question, because look. If we are talking about, you know, the size, the absolute reach, and so on and so forth, we know the numbers. They are literally published every quarter, because those are the numbers that allow stock prices to go up and down. When we are talking about the context of the reach and the efficiency, how to turn your activities into actual results, we are second to none. As I said, we reach the people when it matters, when they are most receptive, because they are talking about something. And let me give you an example of coming from the old analog world. Brands used to spend millions of dollars to connect with people sitting in front of the TV, because a sport event was attracting all these eyeballs, right? Now the eyeballs are moving towards other screens or other different times. So and this is our superpower, I think. We are able to give these brands the audience that they are looking for, because there's an overlap between Facebook and TikTok and Twitter and Snap and Instagram. They are all using these platforms. It's not like I don't use Facebook, I don't use Instagram, I don't use Snap. I use them for different things. If I want to know how to build a Gampla model, I go on YouTube. But if I want to talk about what I just built, probably I will tweet about it. And this is what brands are looking for. This is why we are doing well. We are actually growing at a massive pace. We went from $2 billion 24 months ago, and now we are on pace for $4 billion. We are really growing in terms of how to make this, it sounds harsh, but to make it a strong business now that we know what Twitter is and what Twitter does and what Twitter's superpower is. And whether you are a publisher, okay, or whether you are a brand, you need to deal with this reality. If you are a publisher and you are not on social media, especially on Twitter, if you're not breaking news on Twitter, but you're using some other platform, you're not doing your job right. If you are a brand and you think that the absolute reach of Facebook or YouTube are the only thing that matters, fine, but your ROI will definitely be worse than maybe using all the platforms, okay? So now, this has always been true. So it's not like COVID has changed how we do things. Probably COVID accelerated how we do things. It's like the same thing, but as I said, but it's different. Now we have to be faster. We need to make sure that we spend our money wisely and we talk to the people at the right time. Because somebody scouring YouTube for an old clip has a certain value for a brand. But somebody that wants to know what's happening has a totally different value for a brand.
No, fantastic. Thanks, Maurizio. And we're gonna switch gears a little bit and go to Kim Huat. There's a whole bunch of questions from the audience, Kim Huat, that I think are directed at you, actually. It says, question for Professor Kim Huat. And I'm going to try and aggregate it a little bit because there is some overlap, but they mainly revolve around skills of employees and students who are in the business school at the moment. And I guess there are a number of people in the audience who are asking or curious to know how and what NBS is doing to adapt its curriculum, given what has happened in the last 6 months. To, I guess, better prepare either current students for the workforce, if you're still doing your MBA, or for those who are already in the workforce, working in, say, an SME, for example. You know, where do we go from here?
All right. So I guess in terms of the skill set, one would also have to understand what kind of jobs, what level are we looking at? Are you looking at individuals at a more senior level, which is in the late 30s, or those that are a little bit younger in their 20s to 30s? In terms, I guess the most general answer would be those in between around, say, probably 28 to 35, which is, like, I think, a large number of folks that is probably listening in today. One thing that we have observed is that there's actually an increase, sort of a pivot towards hiring of specialists versus generalists, right? So if you look at, say, for example, a decade ago, right, there's a lot more hiring of generalist kind of training individuals. And I think that's something that has sort of changed, at least in the last couple of years, mainly because, at least that's, I would say, more like an observation, is that industries are trying to get onto this digitalization curve, and whereby you start seeing companies requiring things that is related to analytics and AI and whatnot, right? Having said that, it's not easy to train people from scratch from there, right? Of course, you always hear the rhetoric that, you know, there's always upskilling, retraining and whatnot, but these are skills whereby there is a certain barrier to entry to that learning aspect of things.
Totally agree.
So, yeah, so it's not something that that's so sort of translatable, so as to say. So what we are doing, at least within the business school itself, naturally there's a call from employers for more hard skills. We are providing those classes, right? So, but those classes are given to we are sort of have MSc programs, right? So these are Master of Science program, right, which are more technically related, targeted at a much younger audience, where we would sort of have training for those individuals. At the same time, we also have open executive training programs, which are a little bit catered to the more established audience, right? Those, even though we have analytics, but it's being couched and targeted with a different focus, right? Not so much of the hands-on coding, but more of understanding how the application and so on and so forth. So that's what, at least from the point of the business school, we are trying to do. We have to understand the needs of our technical skills is very different, depending on the type of audience, the type of job sets, of course, at the stage of their careers, right? So I think that's something that we have been actively doing. For the MBA, in this coming year, what happens is that the students can do a sort of like analytics track, right? Whereby they can take up more technical related courses if they would so choose to. But having said that, it's not for everyone. We understand that, you know, every individual is created differently, right? Your thought processes are very different, and that's where we hope to be able to sort of funnel them with the right type of careers and right kind of jobs and skills as well, right?
Okay, no, thanks. Fantastic answer. I'm just going to be cheeky and sneak in a related question, though I know that was supposed to be the last one. Individuals are all built differently. They're all at different stages in their career. So are companies. And there are a couple of SME questions here.
Yes.
And it's a nice one, I think, because a lot of people ask themselves very often, are SMEs able to afford digital adoption? Are they able to compete with the bigger boys? They may not have the same resource or talent pool. How do they leverage this whole rhetoric around digital adaptation and adoption, in order to survive and thrive? What are your thoughts, Professor?
I think in terms of skills wise, that's of course is widely accepted that they have different skills and so on. But largely, I would say if you look at SMEs, I would say the larger challenge to use data specifically for them, it is also the type of industry that you are in. If you are, say, for example, a B2C industry, right? So those typically, they are a little bit easier to move into analytics, largely because the data that you see are sort of generated at the consumer level, and you have a lot of observations and whatnot, right? If you have your system set up, well, the capturing of data is slightly easier. But a lot of SMEs that we see in Singapore itself, they're not necessarily B2C businesses, they are B2B businesses. B2B businesses by design, it is difficult to do analytics if you're an SME because you need to set up the infrastructure just to collect the data in the first place before you do anything else. And that is actually very, very costly. Only the very large companies like 3Ms and one of the large companies, they manufacturing, they have their production lines, they can invest that kind of money for that. So in those kind of situations, SMEs, B2B, the analytics part is going to be a bit more challenging, largely because the infrastructure is not built to sort of collect data at that particular level, right? So because one of the key things for data, right, if you're doing analytics and digitalization, you need to have a lot of observations, right? I mean, if you don't have observations, there's nothing for you to mine, so to say. So that's this little challenge that they would, at least from my experience, they tend to face. And of course, skills-wise, being high talent, of course, this affects everyone, right? SMEs, they do have their challenges, and naturally, of course, yeah.
Fantastic. Mauricio, before we end, I'm going to let you have the last word because you did the honor of sharing so much with us. I know some of my favorite trending topics on Twitter include the US election, the global pandemic, and obviously over the last couple of weeks, the Singapore general election. What are some of the top trending topics for you personally?
Well, one thing that I'm looking forward to is when sports are going to come back. So we notice that there's this massive spike in conversations. Not only, and I'm going to address a couple of points that were raised also in the questions. So it's you need to consider one thing. There's the organic growth of the platform. So we are always expecting, that is improving. So for instance, last year, sports generated more than 3 billion conversations. When sport disappeared, we were on par to go over 4.5 billion, right? So now we stopped a little bit, but what we noticed is that the conversation around football, a conversation around Formula One, they are like 3 or 4 times higher than what they were 12 months ago. And this is again because there's this organic growth. We are growing. Twitter is not disappearing. It's not 2016 any longer. But the second thing, and this is important both for broadcasters and brands, is that people are not at the venue. So a screen, a black mirror is the only way for us to actually consume the content and stay connected with each other. I like to say that Twitter is the biggest sports venue in the world, whether it's an arena, football stadium, and so on and so forth. This is you don't know people, you talk to them, you move at the end of the game, you move out, you go back to your lives, right? But now it's actually enhanced by the fact that there are no stadia to go to, there are no F1 tracks to go to. So for instance, last weekend with the F1, we had this cooperation where anyone tweeting an hashtag associated with the initials and the number of the driver, all these tweets were being, all these hashtags were being displayed on the grandstands, right? So these are ways for publishers and brands to do great things to reach that audience that cannot be distracted. They are not at the venues anymore, but they are going to be watching, and they are going to be talking, and they are going to be interested in what you have to tell them. And this is extremely, extremely powerful. I'm not saying that, it's always going to be like that, but we are going back. Politics is another thing that I do care about. The first thing that I check is politics trends, but I don't want to talk about that because
let's not talk about him here.
It's a thorny subject. Let's put it there.
Fantastic. On that note, I'm conscious of time. I realize people have probably finished their sandwiches and finished sipping their lattes. It's been a good hour. So again, do fill in the survey for people who are on the call. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And I'll say this again, for questions that we were not able to answer because of time, we will have Maurizio and Professor Go revert to you via the school. I also want to thank the NBS. There's a whole team that's been working very hard to sort of ensure that this call with 300 of us go super seamlessly today, and they've been online throughout, troubleshooting and making sure that we all have a good user experience. So thank you, Professor Go, once again, and Maurizio, my friend, grazie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to everybody else, stay safe, and we hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Stay safe.
Bye.